I think the development project in India is far from complete. We have huge inequalities, and we have a complete lack of development of, let's say, the bottom 50%. We have the hungriest population, the largest forms of, let's say, lack of sanitation, basic housing, access to electricity. These are still huge in India. But these are all things that we can do with our own resources. So if we're not doing it, that's very much our political economy problem, and we have to solve it ourselves. A few well-meaning or not so well-meaning experts coming from DFID to advise the poor on how to do things is not really going to make much difference. And in fact, often it's the opposite of helpful. I don't think there's any need for the Development Department of Britain to give money to India in that sense, okay? I think the aid money that DFID gives is so small that it's almost irrelevant. I think that DFID itself is not playing a particularly huge role in poverty reduction or development as such in India. And really right now, I think there would be a need to reconsider the entire relationship. Let me put it this way. If the government in Britain is really concerned about reducing poverty and encouraging economic growth and all of those things in India, then it should make differences in its own trade, investment, and intellectual property rules, not bother to give a little bit of trickle money here and there. In a sense, I suppose, you still want to be rulers of the world, and one way of pretending that you are is by handing out money here and there. I think that one of the big constraints to the economic growth and development of India is the fact that a lot of our trade patterns are not sufficiently employment generating, that a lot of our access to technologies that would help us are limited and constrained by the enforcement of patent rights and monopolies, that there have been active measures by the UK government and a number of other European governments to prevent the development of industries like pharmaceuticals, which employ a lot of people and provide cheap medicines in India. So it's really in those areas that there should be a rethinking. Giving a little bit of money is now almost irrelevant because the amounts involved are so small. I mean, probably the UK government needs it much more than the Indian government, for sure. Jobless growth is a huge problem in India. We've had now a decade of almost jobless growth in the organized sector, even when the organized sector in GDP was growing massively, 8-fold, 10-fold. We've had a period when most of the growth that has occurred in employment is of insecure, casual, and self-employment in very fragile circumstances, very vulnerable employment. So we really have to think of a new strategy that is based on generating good quality employment rather than just generating GDP and profitability. Now, that in turn means that we have to move away from either the northern model, if you like, or the Chinese model. We have to develop our own, which is, in a sense, bottom-up, which is generating a viable form of self-employment and more employment in public services, which are woefully inadequate in India. So that is something that can be done, but it requires a reorientation of the macroeconomic strategy of the government.